Madam Speaker, I'm happy to participate in the debate today, and it will come as no surprise that I will say up front that I will vote against this bill. The Minister of Finance loves to yell in this House that this is a generational budget. What is clearly and unequivocally true is that this is a budget imposing massive, crushing, and unforgivable generational debt. I can't help but point out that our deficit now is just under $80 billion, a number that would make even Justin Trudeau blush. Canada's productivity has slipped badly among G7 nations. But why? Well, capital is staying on the sidelines as confidence lags. Investment in equipment, new innovation, and business efficiencies are on hold because of basic economic uncertainty. That is the essence of productivity. The last thing our economy needs right now is uncertainty, yet here we are. I've listened intently to my colleagues on the Liberal side of the House talk about this budget, and it left me wondering how so many people have suddenly come down with the case of sometimers. Perhaps it's a form of political amnesia because it seems that the front bench of this so-called new government has forgotten that they paved the way for this massive dive into new generational debt. While the Prime Minister says his words were poorly chosen when he said, "Who cares?" about dealing with Trump, what is said in jest often holds an element of truth. His "who cares" comment tells us a couple of things. Perhaps he's just going through the motions with the U.S. CUSMA is the backstop, at least for now. He loves to say that Canada has the best deal right now. Well, frankly, that's a crock. We have the same CUSMA deal we had before the election, with a pile of new tariffs on everything outside that agreement. That is an abject failure. Maybe he doesn't care because he's hoping Trump loses his court cases, perhaps loses control in Congress in the midterms, or the U.S. economy finally feels the inevitable pain of tariffs with job losses and inflation. Silence and "who cares" is dangerous, misguided, irresponsible, and frankly lazy. We are in a trade vacuum with a case of George Costanza's elbows down shrinkage factor. Everyone knows it's a precarious game negotiating with Trump and his sycophant team of validators. But Trump is a bit like Biff Tannen in Back to the Future 2, where the bully controls the dystopian town and the people around him. But perhaps the strategy is just to wait him out and hope for the best. When Trump opens up CUSMA, which he most certainly will, Canada's economic stability is literally on the table. The idea that we're going to supplant our trade with the U.S. with other jurisdictions may appear to be an opportunity, but it is at best a long-term objective. Ask anyone who has built a successful SME in Canada, and they will tell you that it takes decades to develop the relationships and supply chains needed to provide solid predictability in our export markets. 75% of Canada's exports go to the U.S. It may fluctuate, and it has over time, but fundamentally our relationship with the U.S. is never going to change in our lifetime. To suggest otherwise ignores facts, history, and the natural political, geographic, economic, and basic integration of our economies. The North-South network of supply chains, transportation, and logistics, built over decades in relationships and confidence and trust in financial linkages, is not something that our manufacturing and service sector can abandon or miraculously recreate in other jurisdictions just because the Prime Minister says so. It took 100 years for our economy to evolve to ensure efficient movement of goods, capital, and stable supply chains. Saying that we're going to double trade with Europe is fine, but it's not going to fix our problems before CUSMA comes up for review. And let's be clear, Canada's economy evolved over the past 50 years through technological change and a realization that trade liberalization was the only pathway to improving Canadians' standard of living. Money flows to the path of least resistance, balanced against return. Policy drives the creation of that path. Yet as we developed our North-South trade strategy, we abdicated our responsibility in supporting a national manufacturing strategy and, most importantly, a national access to capital strategy. I know this because I've spent the past 20 years helping Canadian startups commercialize their ideas against strong and sometimes insurmountable barriers against capital access. There were incredible successes in the Canadian startup ecosystem like Shopify and Hootsuite, among many others. And BlackBerry literally is responsible for the creation of the Waterloo innovation machine that paved the way for Canadian entrepreneurs to chase their dreams. The Harper government launched an incredibly helpful program to enhance the innovation sector through support to the angel investing community. It was inexpensive yet enormously successful, and it bridged the gap between ideas and capital. Angel investor groups popped up across Canada and aggregated substantial amounts of capital to support Canadian companies. Sadly, the Trudeau government cancelled this program. Over the past 10 years, we've missed the boat in establishing an access to capital platform to support companies beyond the early stage phase. Regional development agencies could have been the platform for this, but instead are basically acting as bailout agencies instead of a network of strategic investment for Canadian startups. I've seen dozens of companies leave for the US simply because they couldn't obtain funding in Canada. The US offered the solutions to risk-averse Canadians to provide a runway of support to these companies who wanted to stay here but simply couldn't turn down the opportunities south of the border. This should be low-hanging fruit for us. If the government is intent on nosediving our nation into debt, how about we first take a look at how we fund our brightest and best in this country and try to fix the gap between capital and ideas? We need to incentivize Canadian capital to actually invest and stay here in Canada. Look, 8 out of 10 startups ultimately fail. Angel investors, angel funds, and venture capital funding vehicles are familiar with this risk. But as we navigate this uncertain time, as I said earlier, capital is staying on the sidelines. 15 years ago, it was easier for us to attract early-stage investment because it was the policy priority of the federal and provincial governments. Accredited investors organized and went on a tear of investing in Canadian companies. It was a beautiful thing. But investing fatigue has now set in, both because deal flow is weak and confidence is low. The incentives for investing in startups today in Canada are non-existent. That is the barrier to investment. That is the tragedy of where we missed the chance over the last 10 years to provide incentives for investment. And to be clear, this is not a tax break for the rich. This is an incentive for people who are willing to take risk on Canadian companies. Make no mistake, the risk is high. The 2 out of 10 that actually make it to market need years of mentoring and support with multiple rounds of investment. Unless we are prepared to support this ecosystem, we will continue to tilt at windmills, watch our best and brightest move south, and continue to weaken our domestic innovation ecosystem. My leader is on to something. He's really on to something when he talks about eliminating capital gains taxes, provided the gains are invested in Canadian companies. People understand this at the ground level. If we could provide this kind of incentive to support Canadian startups, we can actually build a more diversified economy where Canadian companies and capital stays here and grows here. This is the real nation-building effort, one company at a time. It will create confidence, enthusiasm, and bring massive private capital reserves back into our economy. Canada is overregulated, overtaxed, disincentivized, and uncompetitive with the worst productivity rate in the G7. The government says it wants new ideas. I just threw several at it, all validated by past best practices, all cancelled by the Liberals. The Liberals talk a good game, but talk is cheap. The "we believe in Canada" ad nauseam is offensive to me. It suggests that only Liberals believe in Canada. I also believe in Canada. My life's work has been dedicated to creating value for Canadians, jobs for Canadians, and growth in my region. My small grandchildren will pay the price for this, Madam Speaker, and only Conservatives will bring sanity and solid fiscal policy back to our country and put Canada first. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, just a very quick flashback. You know, if you talk about foreign investment that leaves Canada going into other countries, in particular the United States, I'll remind the member that when his leaders sat around the cabinet, that was the biggest destruction of the manufacturing industry in the province of Ontario in generations. Fast forward to today, where today we have a Prime Minister that is literally attracting hundreds of millions going into billions of dollars of investment coming into Canada from around the world as we look at ways in which we can expand trade opportunities. The types of ideas I appreciate the member raising, but I think that we need to recognize that there is a substantive difference between the way in which the government has been approaching increasing trade amongst here on a one Canadian economy to expanding opportunities and bringing investments, as I say, into the billions of dollars coming into Canada because of the efforts that he does. I'm wondering if the member could provide his thoughts. Does he support the Prime Minister's travels to the degree in which the Prime Minister is being very successful at bringing export opportunities for his constituents and indeed for all Canadians?
Honourable Member for Niagara South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That is the most delusional question I've heard since I got elected. You know, the Prime Minister has been on 28 trips around the world for photo ops, handshakes, MOUs that are non-binding. And if there's not a dollar that has been set foot in Canada yet. I'd like actually the honourable member to tell me, give me a specific company that has actually moved capital into Canada, because right now capital is leaving Canada at record rates to the U.S. That's where we need to focus our attention, not this fictitious view that letters of intent and memorandums of understanding have any meaning at all. It's all photo ops and gaslighting.
Yes. Good job, Frank.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Thank you. I'm pleased to see you, Madam Speaker. As always, my colleague for Lac-Saint-Jean asked a question to a Conservative colleague after his speech, saying the Conservatives keep demolishing the Liberal budget, and rightly so, in their speeches. However, my colleague wondered what the Conservatives did to try and defeat the budget. The Conservatives said, we've done everything we can in our party to defeat this budget at the vote. But the Bloc Québécois has 22 MPs, 22 votes against the budget. Out of 143 Conservative MPs, how many voted against the budget?
The Honourable Member for Niagara South.
If the question is how many Conservative members voted against the budget, the answer is zero. Or sorry, voted for the budget, the answer is zero. We all voted against this budget. I voted against this budget. This is a generational disaster of debt for Canadians. When I said that the amount of deficit that we're going to accrue this year would make Justin Trudeau blush, this is a generational catastrophe that my grandchildren are going to pay for. I will vote against the budget again, vote against all of the enabling legislation, and proud to do it.
The Honourable Member for Souris Moose Mountain.
My honourable colleague just gave an excellent speech, and in that speech he mentioned capital flight, which is a real concern in Canada at the moment. We just recently heard again of another company, a Canadian company, actually has a mine in my riding, that's now building an export terminal in the United States instead of Canada because of over-taxation, over-regulation, and overburdening by this Liberal government. Could my colleague maybe expand a little bit on that, on why policy matters and why it's important to have pro-business, business-friendly policies in Canada?
Honourable Member for Niagara South.
You know, I want to take it a step further too, because we're not only over-regulated, overtaxed, and de-incentivized for investment coming into Canada. The upfront cost of getting access to capital in this country is enormous. That's why companies are fleeing to the U.S., because there are incentive programs, especially in California, if you're in the technology sector. You can get funding in innovation centers in California far faster than we can in Canada. It's a burden here. We need to deregulate, get rid of red tape. Just building an industrial building in this country right now can take years before you put shovels in the ground. The cost of development charges, fees, regulation, it's outrageous. We have painted ourselves in the corner over the last 20 years, and it needs to stop, and I think the Conservative Party will put a stop to that. Hear, hear.